Whew, wow. Really? Starting with this, huh? Okay, well, I guess we got to start honestly and crush the dreams of those of you still hoping for a Warriors movie. I think a Warriors movie would be a terrible idea, and I have some pretty damning thoughts as to why. I know. We all want a Warriors movie, generally speaking, and I know this doesn't apply to everyone. Not everyone wants a movie, and I know some fans who are against any sort of official representation of the characters being considered canon, and we'll talk about that eventually, so stick around. But first, what I want to make clear to everyone is what a Warriors movie would actually look like. I know Lizard Wizard sort of touched on this topic briefly in his review of SS Warrior Cats, but I wanted to expand on that. As an aspiring animator and someone who has spent a lot of time researching movie production and how films get made, I feel like I have some reasonable conclusions on what some of the problems a Warriors movie would face, even in the best case scenario. Assuming that there would be a studio willing to put all the money that it would need into the film, it had the ideal group of people to fully realize the idea, and that the Aarons were willing to give them the rights to the property, there's still plenty of other hurdles that would be extremely difficult to face. This is also only looking at the problems a Warriors adaptation would have here in the West. If a studio in Europe or Japan or wherever else wanted to make a Warriors movie, then not everything I talk about here will apply, but I just think that if one were to get made, a Western studio would be the one to do it. Let's start with what I think is one of the biggest problems with adapting Warriors: marketing. Who or what audience will Warriors be aimed for? And I know what some of you are thinking. Well, the same audience as the books, of course. But there's where I'm going to have to stop you, because reading about violent cats killing each other is a whole different ballpark than watching violent cats kill each other. It may not seem different at first, but it really is, especially in the movie business. Plus, any Warriors film would be animated, of course. And there's a certain stigma in the West about animated movies that say they need to be family films. Which sucks, yes, but there is sort of a reason for it, unfortunately, so please bear with me as I try to explain. Basically, the family market in the US is big, and animated movies from studios like Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, you name it, cost a lot of money. A lot of money. Making an animated film is a huge undertaking, and I know the market for animated films is good right now, but it hasn't always been that way. The family market keeps animation studios afloat here in the US, and in order to make a successful animated movie, it's got to be aimed at the widest audience possible. Anyone can go see a family film, and animated movies need everyone to come and see their movie in order to make the money back. If a film can't make the money back that it spent on it, the movie is a failure, good people lose their jobs, and sequels are never made. Warriors would have to be marketed to people outside of the already established fan of the books. We've seen this countless times for other book-to-film adaptations, but I'm just making sure I cover everything here. And let's face it, guys, Warriors is not a family movie, and to make it a family movie would mean tearing apart a lot of what Warriors is to so many of us. This is not just about the gore either, because as gruesome as Warriors can be sometimes, even if you took the gore out, Warriors would still be too dark to get a PG rating. Blue Star's downward spiral into depression and self-loathing, Yellowfang murdering her son, Broken Tail, Cinderpelt having to give up her dream to become a medicine cat instead, none of this could make it into a family film here in the West. It would have to be changed, or made so subtle that the kids wouldn't notice it happening, or cut altogether. And I hope I speak for all of us when I say that removing or changing any of that content would really ruin any Warriors adaptation for me. And yes, sometimes animated movies get away with some heavy or dark themes, but nothing comes close to the amount of death and psychologically damaging material Warriors has, especially if you saw it on screen. I still remember parents complaining about how Inside Out's story was too sad, or Box Trolls had too much gross imagery, and as a result, those movies took risks that hurt them in the box office, as opposed to burning garbage heaps like Minions that take no risks and make enough money to fill a Scrooge McDuck swimming pool. Warriors would either take too many risks to be successful, or remove all risks, and then we'd have a sing-song happy Warriors movie that's just so gosh darn swell, and why don't we just let all our cats live in the wild if the thought of Fireheart singing a song like this without fences, where I can run free, makes your stomach turn, then good, it should. Just an adaptation of Into the Wild alone would have, let's see here, Redtail, Oakheart, Spotted Leaf, Lionheart, Blue Star loses a life, 5 character deaths, 3 of which would be on screen and of fairly established characters at that point. Threats of killing a minor, a bad guy who's been killing babies, revelations of family murder, lots of violence, territory and gang wars, the successful exile of a certain group or minority, and a minor having to leave his home to live with a gay guy. All joking aside, but seriously, I know I hardly need to keep saying it, but Warriors is dark, and a loyal film adaptation would probably be too much for younger kids to handle, and it would probably have to give the movie a PG-13 rating, which is the equivalent to a death sentence for an animated movie. And that's just talking about the first book. The rest of the series keeps building on top of that, and I don't think a studio would want to try to adapt just the first book. There's just not enough material from the first book to warrant a movie, plus you're then asking the studio to dedicate its time and money to 5 more films after that, 1 for each book, and that's just an unrealistic expectation. There aren't that many sequels to some of the most beloved and money-making animated films out there. Even Lion King and Shrek don't have 6 theatrically numbered sequels. It's true we have a few exceptions to that rule, but I don't think we want Warriors to get the Land Before Time treatment. So, I hear some of you say, well, what about adapting one of the Super Editions instead? Well, that's a great idea, actually. I think the Super Editions would be the best stories to adapt to film. The only problem with that is even Blue Star's Prophecy relies on information readers get from the original series, and with no Fireheart, we've lost the excuse for exposition dumps onto the audience. Fireheart is the perfect character to see this world from, since he comes into it completely blind like the audience. Plus, no studio is going to want to adapt the less popular books of the franchise when they could have the obvious choice in the original series. Think about all the times Narnia has been adapted. No one starts with The Magician's Nephew, even though that book is awesome. No, they always go for the moneymaker, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe first, and then try to make the other books, but inevitably have to give up the project. I will have a Magician's Nephew movie someday, damn it! No. We'd be lucky if they tried to split up the first series into 2 parts. The first movie adapting Into the Wild, Fire and Ice, and Forest of Secrets. And the second movie, only permitting that the first movie did well enough, mind you, would be adapted from Rising Storm, Dangerous Path, and Darkest Hour. This is honestly being generous, and I'm sorry to say that it's far more likely for a studio to try to fit the whole first series into 1 hour-and-a-half to 2 hour movie. Yet again, this film is animated, and to support the cost of making it, it needs to be marketed to everyone, meaning it has to have the expected running time. The longer a movie is, the more it costs, and the less likely people are going to go see it. Warriors is not Lord of the Rings, and you can't market a movie centered around cats as the main characters for a 3-hour film. But even being generous and saying it could get a 2.5-hour runtime, I don't think that this is enough time. We're going to assume, for best case scenario here, and say they make 2 movies out of the first series. Here's what they'd have to fit into the first movie from the books. Rusty, oh yes, and let's not forget all the name changes that are going to be happening in this 2-hour flick. What do the commercials say? Rusty? Firepaw? Fireheart? He'll only be known as Rusty for the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie. Firepaw? Better, but the audience is introduced to him in the movie as Rusty. Fireheart? Well, that's kind of a spoiler. Anyway, Rusty lives in a house as a pet. He goes outside and hears about the cats that live in the woods. He leaves his home and joins the ThunderClan cats out in the forest as Firepaw, and trains under several mentors and meets everyone in the clan, most of whom are not too excited that he's one of them now. Firepaw works hard to prove them wrong and makes friends and enemies, all while learning about his own clan and the other clans that share borders with them. Firepaw rescues Yellowfang, the clan is attacked, Lionheart dies, Spotted Leaf dies. Firepaw and Greypaw take Ravenpaw to Barley and learn of Tigerclaw killing Redtail. Firepaw helps ShadowClan exile their evil leader Brokenstar. Firepaw becomes Fireheart. Fireheart and Greystripe get sent on a quest to find WindClan. They find WindClan and bring them home. Greystripe kills Whiteclaw. Fireheart and Greystripe get apprentices of their own, Cinderpaw and Brackenclaw. Greystripe meets Silverstream. Greystripe is missing most of the time, and Fireheart has to cover training both apprentices. Fireheart feels ostracized from clan life and starts meeting Princess, his sister, a kitty pet. Cinderpaw gets hit by a car but survives. Fireheart brings back Cloud Kit, Princess's son, to be raised in ThunderClan. There's a battle in WindClan to help WindClan cats keep their territory. Cinderpaw becomes Yellowfang's apprentice. RiverClan is suffering from the floods. Fireheart and Greystripe help them out. Silverstream is going to have Greystripe's kits. Fireheart gets Cloudpaw as his apprentice. Fireheart finds out about Bluestar's kits in RiverClan. Hostilities between clans rises. Silverstream dies giving birth. RiverClan wants the kits to live in RiverClan. Tigerclaw plots and follows through with an attack on ThunderClan and tries to kill Bluestar. Fireheart stops him. Tigerclaw is exiled. ThunderClan is devastated by Tigerclaw's betrayal. Greystripe leaves ThunderClan to live with his kits in RiverClan. Whew. Okay. Yes, I paraphrased and left out most of the smaller details, and I might have missed some of the important plot points or put them in the wrong order, but the reason I went through all of that is to try to emphasize the fact that there is way too much story to fit into one movie. And if it's still not clear, let me just say this. Remember Last Airbender? A Warriors film even only containing the first 3 books. I know that Guardians of Ga'Hoole is probably a better comparison here, but I've not watched that movie yet or read the book series that it's based off of, so I don't feel qualified to make that comparison. With all that said, though, it brings me to another negative to making a Warriors movie. Cut content. And we aren't just talking about somehow rewriting the plot points I already mentioned to fit a script with an appropriate running time. We're talking about the worst possible kind of cuts. Character cuts. As much as it hurts me to say this, a Warriors film would most definitely have to cut characters. There's too big of a cast and too many names to convey in such a short amount of time. It wouldn't just be minor characters like some of the elders or queens either. It would be characters like Whitestorm, Brackenfur, Lionheart, Running Wind, One Whisker, Crooked Star, and Dustpelt. And what might even be worse is the possibility of them combining characters like Darkstripe and Longtail, or Mistyfoot and Stonefur, or Cinderpelt and Cloudtail. So they can hit story points, but don't have to make screen time to introduce new characters. It sounds like a horrible idea to any of us who really love these characters, but from a movie-making standpoint, this kind of mashing of characters together to make the narrative work would almost be necessary. As an example, I'll go over the one that sounds the most egregious. Combining Cloudtail and Cinderpelt into one character. This might sound like a crazy idea, but actually it's not too far of a stretch for the filmmakers to consider. Fireheart, in our hypothetical first film, which covers the first 3 books, has 2 apprentices. Cinderpelt and Cloudpaw. Neither of these characters have any real consequence on the plot when you think about it, and time to develop both characters on screen would take away from time dedicated to speeding Fireheart along the plot. You could keep a fan-favorite character, Cinderpelt, and cut Cloudtail by making Cinderpelt Fireheart's niece, who's got attitude, aka she's just been given Cloudtail's personality. Then Cinderpelt still has her accident, and maybe starts turning into more of the Cinderpelt we know and love, but Cloudtail is effectively cut from the script altogether, and Cinderpelt's character is also partially butchered as well. This film, Cinderpelt, may even follow Fireheart into the forest as a kitten right from the beginning, so the studio can cut the whole part of the story where Fireheart goes and meets Princess to save more time. So some of you may be saying to yourselves at this point, okay, yeah, a Warriors movie would probably be a really bad idea, but I know how I'll get my animated Warriors fix: a TV show, Game of Thrones style. To which I'll say, maybe, but you're gonna run into a lot of the same problems. You still have the problem of what age group to market for, and while the running time is now theoretically not a problem, money is, because TV shows have a smaller production budget to work with, and smaller budgets could still mean cuts to the story or characters. Plus, TV shows have a pretty strong formula for how episodes need to set up. A problem needs to be established pretty quickly, characters work towards solving said problem, but things just get worse, and then there's conflict, and then the resolution with maybe a cliffhanger. And this formula might seem like a good way to tackle Warriors, but I could see it having a lot of problems, and adding unnecessary additional melodrama. Not to say a Warriors TV show would be in as bad of shape as a movie, but I'm just not convinced a TV show would be the best place for Warriors to get a visual adaptation that stayed loyal to the books either. If you want my honest opinion, maybe Warriors was never meant for the big screen, or even your TV screen. But maybe, just maybe, it could be meant for your computer screen someday. There's already a ton of amazing Warriors art out there, and amazing animators who have spent countless hours bringing some of our favorite characters to life, myself included. And it's their dedication that has brought me to the conclusion that a Warriors web series would be the best way for the books to be adapted. Something similar to SS Warrior Cats, But with some of the polish and funding that projects like Cartoon Hangover creates, or the team responsible for making The Reward and its follow-up series, this would still require getting the rights from the Urans, and who knows if they're even interested in seeing their work get a visual representation. It's very possible they don't want that right now, and we should respect that. But I think a lot of what holds a Warriors animated series back is the marketing. As a web series, the show could literally reach anyone who is interested in it, and with sites like Kickstarter and Patreon, the creators of the show could work with a budget that's built by people who are actually interested in seeing it. Episodes wouldn't be under restrictive higher power to follow a formula either, and with the lower stakes of a web-based series, the show could potentially collaborate with prominent members of the community, and yet not be on such a large scale that people would feel discouraged from continuing to draw their own representations of the characters, which has always been a unique aspect of this community and one that I myself would hate to see vanish. So while I don't think a good Warriors movie is really possible, it doesn't mean we should give up hope entirely, and we shouldn't take for granted the wonderful artists who are already making tons and tons of Warriors content. I look forward to seeing your thoughts below, and I hope I didn't just destroy my channel with this video. Like I said, I was being pretty generous in my discussion. A real film would face a lot more challenges than already mentioned. And if you like this video, it's the first of its kind, so congratulations! You're here on the birth of a new series I have, of several that I plan to do, so hopefully you stick around and hopefully you like my voice enough to continue watching. And if these turn out to be a total bomb, then I guess I'll just go back to animating. And don't worry, animations are still being worked on. I've got so many maps to work on.